Afternoon. Welcome to the June 8th, 2011 meeting of the City Council, special meeting of the Glendale City Council. Can we have a roll call, please?
Council members Manukian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Quintero. Weaver.
Here.
Mayor Friedman.
Here. Can we hear your report, please?
Notice for the special City Council meeting of Wednesday, June 8th, 2011 was posted on Thursday, June 2nd, 2011 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Before you is Director of Administrative Services Finance regarding budget study session GWP, including general budget wrap-up, transit fund, fee discussion, and other funds as necessary.
Thank you. Mr. Starbird.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you again for your time and attention. This is budget study session number 10, and I have added so far, not including today, I think 51 hours of public session on budget discussion. Of course, that doesn't include the time you have spent away from the dais or the time that staff has spent, which probably adds up to hundreds of hours of time.
Excuse me, is your microphone on?
Yes, it is. Am I not speaking loud enough? City Clerk had me turned down?
That's better.
There we go. Okay. I don't have to start over again, do I?
No.
Thank you.
That'll waste time.
No. Mr. Quintero, we received a notice of Mr. Quintero, although he had hoped to be here, is unavailable for medical reasons. Under normal circumstances, given the important items that we're planning on discussing today, we would encourage you to have a full City Council, but frankly, we don't have very much time remaining. So we'd still like to plug forward with the matters before us today, which is principally to look at the general fund and to receive direction from you relative to the major strategies for balancing the city's general fund budget in the upcoming fiscal year 2011-12. Following today's study session, because I'm anticipating this afternoon will be taken entirely by the general fund, the next study session will come back and discuss transit fund and wrap up on GWP, and that'll be next week. With that, let's turn to the schedules that we provided you today that we hope will be the information you'll need to remind you of the hours of discussion you've had over the past 10 study sessions, and from which you can then give us direction relative to the various strategies. Bob, you want to take them through those?
Sure.
Bob Elliott.
Thank you, Jim. Madam Mayor, members of the Council, as Jim noted, the schedules, we have prepared 3 in summary for our discussion today. The Schedule 1 is the recap that we discussed yesterday on the PowerPoint. This is in detail of all the strategies that we have discussed.
Let me touch on that one quickly, because yesterday we did not show you a breakout on those groupings of strategies between outsourcing consolidation and net remaining vacancies after program reductions. We have assigned numbers to those. The 2 key ones are the employee concessions number and the net remaining vacancies after program reductions. This is essentially the savings we anticipate from the hiring freeze. We've tried to be pretty conservative here, but I've had a great deal of concern about the fact that we now have as part of our anticipated strategies the savings from our hiring freeze, because in the past that has been I'll call it a cushion in our budget, which frankly we have needed the last couple of years in order to maintain the balanced budget. This time we've actually incorporated that figure as part of our strategy, and we'll touch on those in a bit.
As Jim noted, we've broken out the various strategies, and let me walk you through those again. At the top of the schedule, we have the initial estimates, the $162 million in revenue, and the $180 million in expenditures with the gap of $18 million. These are summaries of the strategies listed down in the lower part of the worksheet. We have $6 million worth of strategies on the revenue side. Those are detailed under that column. They consist of increasing the electric transfer $2 million, the $1.5 million increase from the GRA loan repayment that we have discussed, fee increases, which we went through yesterday, of $1.3 million, use of the police augmentation fund of $1 million, and the $250,000 of potential chargeback to the utility for police and fire protection. On the appropriation side, the cost reductions, we've highlighted all the various components of that. As Jim noted, the $3 million in concessions, potential outsourcing of $200,000, transition of city views to an electronic format, elimination of the hardware and software budgets, that's more of a cleanup item, reduction in the paramedic fund transfer, suspension of the general fund transfer to the nutritional meals. If you recall, there was a significant fund balance, or not significant, sufficient fund balance in that fund that we can suspend the transfer for a year or two. As Jim alluded to, the net remaining vacancies at about $3 million. That's something we have never done in the past. We've also programmed in $292,000 for additional contractual reductions. As I think we have noted, that we've sent out letters to all our vendors asking them for 10% reductions. We've had a decent response. We have been tracking those, and we'll look to see that we get the $292,000 through various reductions. We've eliminated the Ferguson Group contract for the federal lobbyist for the upcoming year, and are looking to save another $100,000 in some of our Tri-City efforts with Burbank and Pasadena. That is an ongoing effort at this point. And again, the expansion of the BLS model that the chief covered during his presentation, another $500,000 reductions. In the past, we have lumped the approximately $4 million in reductions in programs. We've isolated those out. Scroll down here in this area right here as by department, and you can see the amounts that were reduced by the various department. Our goal today, and we have another spreadsheet that we wanted to walk through, Schedule 2, which is all the proposed reductions that have been highlighted in all the different budget study sessions thus far of the proposed eliminations. As you recall, those were what the executive team put together after many days of meeting and trying to programmatically look at all the different departments and suggest reductions in the various areas as they are discretionary, essential, or priority.
Bob, question. The fee increases, now that's a different number, isn't it, after the meeting we had yesterday?
Yes, it is. We left the, there's a couple issues with the fees. We had come to about $1.5 million yesterday. In discussions today, we've decided to leave that at a conservative $1.3 million. Reason being, there's still some effort to go through and implement. Some have 30-day, some have 60-day implementation factors. So not knowing what those will be in the totals as yet, we decided to leave the estimate at $1.3 million.
I'm thinking is if you have a little more than $1 million a month, so if it takes us until, depending on the nature of the fees, some fees require a noticing period and public hearing and upwards of 60 days for implementation. So to be conservative, we've estimated if we lost 2 months, we'd lose a little over $200,000. So our thinking is we try to get it done quicker, but in any case, we've thought we'd work with the current conservative number of about $1.3 million. Now again, you got a little bit of leeway there. Could be $1.4 million. Unlikely it'll be $1.5 million because that would assume all the rates go into effect July 1. And again, we lose a little over $100,000 a month for each month after that. So we will work to have as many fees as can be by July 1, but some just can't practically be implemented in time because of statutory requirements.
As a follow-up, we will again the goal was to include the adopted fee schedule within the budget hearing as an attachment, so that'll be out for everybody's review again. It's basically what we reviewed yesterday. There's not a bunch of changes. We tried to highlight what the major changes were yesterday. Again, that'll be part of the budget hearing on the 21st. So with that, if there's any other questions on this schedule, I wanted to go to the reductions and go through the reductions, which is Schedule 2 in your packet.
Well, maybe before we do that, we've walked through these. Are there any of these broad strategies that you'd like to go back and talk about? Any particular concerns with any of them? Because we've anticipated we spend most of our morning going through the roughly $4 million in various department reductions. But if there's any of these that we need to spend more time talking about, we should touch on those. We've mentioned them several times throughout the study sessions. Anything there in particular?
No, I received this last night and I haven't gone through it in detail, but I think in general it's what we basically discussed during the budget hearings.
It's been very consistent.
And I'll make comments about the overall budget issues later, and that's not
All right, then I'm expecting we'd move into the part that will take most of the time, which is, and for which all the executives and their staff are here, which will be going through department by department the various detailed reductions that they've touched on before, but to see now on Schedule B and then maybe flowing over into Schedule, pardon me, I'm using the same letters. Finance decided at this point to stop using letters on their schedules. We're now using numbers on schedules. So Schedule 1, 2, and 3 will move from each department from Schedule 1 to 2, and if you want to get into more detail on the various priorities, then Schedule 3. Okay, Bob, back to you.
Okay, switching to Schedule 2, if your prerogative is we can walk through each department, I can do that, and as you have questions, the various department heads can come up and give you their input. Starting with Administrative Services Finance, our reduction basically was a layoff of a full-time position. The net effects are we'll service the departments a little bit slower, but that's something we can incorporate in staff remaining.
Was that are you laying somebody off, or is it
Is it filled position?
It's a filled position. So we'd likely have a notice of layoff. Work very hard, of course. People can bump down into other positions. We work very hard to put people into open positions that we wouldn't otherwise be eliminating, whether in the general fund or outside the general fund. So HR will work, very hard to find places for people in positions that are continuing to be funded. But we may, at the end of the day, have some people with a notice of layoff. I should note...
This is the first time that did we discuss laying off anybody?
Yes.
We did?
There's, I believe, 10 or 11 incorporated in this.
Okay. In general, I'm not in favor of layoffs. I don't think anyone is, but I prefer more getting reductions through attrition. But
well, we would too. In fact, part of our goal has been not to worsen the economic condition in the state by having people lose their jobs.
Or in the city.
Or the city. But we're at a point now that we can't avoid it. Now, again, our first priority will be to try and find ways that people can continue to have a job. It may not be the job they were in. It may not pay what they were getting paid in the job they were in, but hopefully we can find a way to move people into positions. Attrition would mean then for as long as it takes before there'd be some position open up, we wouldn't have the savings. And if you take 11 positions, I don't know if we have a value on the 11, but could be a pretty good piece of our $3 to $4 million in savings. I might note, it's important to note in Schedule 3, you have a listing of all of the levels of programs. So on Schedule 1, you have the total by department.
The remaining programs on Schedule.
Right, the remaining programs, the ones that are being funded. So if you want to look, if you disagree with the prioritization and something that is continuing to be funded, you have some question about that, then this should be as much about what are we funding as what we're proposing to not fund. If you have questions about it, the staff is here to respond to that. We want to make sure you're comfortable with the priorities that are set and especially the reductions, which may lead you to want to look at Schedule 3 to see what is being funded. If you have any questions about that, we're here to answer it.
Jim, could you just talk on the first one?
Or just on administrative services for now.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. I'm comparing Schedule 2 and 3. So I see finance position. It says priority. Then do I look down? Discretionary is out already. Is that what you're saying? LifeScan is gone?
No. In this case...
It remains.
Now you're throwing everything back.
In this case, it's remaining because it has a revenue offset, if you'll notice.
Yeah. Just to explain the schedule, again, the essential were the key, that was the most important level, then the priority, which was, important, and then discretionary was how we rated something that we could eliminate.
Okay.
LiveScan for finance is not a core function.
I guess, so the finance position is the accounts payable?
It's, potentially. It's one of two positions.
Okay, I'm just trying to correlate between the two tables. Two different names.
Yeah. This is, administrative services is a bit of a unique circumstance with LiveScan because although it's not considered an essential,
I understand. It was
it pays for itself.
Bad example.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
Is that a grant we're getting?
No, it's the fingerprinting.
Okay. It's revenues that it's generating.
Yeah, it's revenue producing.
Well, I would like after Schedule 2 to take a look at Schedule 3. We don't have to go through line by line, but there's at least one program I'd like to talk about, and
Okay.
my
Well,
colleagues.
it might be
might.
useful, frankly, what I'm doing is our next department we're going to is community development.
I can toggle back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay.
if that's
So
what you-
we might just take this department by department. And
Okay. Good idea.
So next one up is community development, is that right?
Is there
Based
any-
on schedule, oh, I see, based, going to follow Schedule 1 or Schedule 2?
Which,
Let's
yeah,
follow
which one
Schedule
is-
2, because I think that's what we have in
Yeah.
front of us.
Yeah, those are the reductions, that's what we need to
Schedule
look
2,
at.
yeah.
Okay.
But I can flip to Schedule 3 so you can see what's remaining up here. But
I think, why don't we go through Schedule 2, and then if, we have, I think all of us, I'm just looking down the dais, have both schedules side by side. So if somebody has an issue on Schedule 3, we'll let you know.
Okay. Just making a note, what you don't see on Schedule 2 is city attorney, city clerk, or city treasurer, because there are no reductions in those departments. Okay? Then that would next then take us down to community development.
Okay, so
And I would like to know the layoffs as opposed to the frozen positions that are vacant.
Okay? You know, we should have each department come up,
gonna say,
because I don't know that Bob will know the answer to
That's
which
right.
positions are filled and which ones aren't.
I'm here.
I can read it, but
Well, for community development department, where the reduction would be a filled position that would amount to a staff planner being laid off, and that would be in the planning division. In the neighborhood services division, we would eliminate the rental housing inspection program altogether. That amounts to about a portion of a staff member, which we would incorporate somehow. It will probably not end up to laying off an individual. At that point, we'll just end the program and we'll reassign the individuals. These are the two eliminations that we're proposing at this point based on the list of priorities and discretionary.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Hagani? Thank you.
Community services.
services and parks next.
And this is where I had one question.
Sure.
And this was a suggestion of Mr. Starbird's,
His
which
fault.
was, this is his fault, but I'm not sure I disagree with him. I think I do agree with him, which is to try going to a model with skate park where it's open without the supervisor, and possibly utilizing volunteers.
By the way, this isn't a surprise for him. We've had some emails going
I
back and
assume.
forth, and have had legal weigh in on the state laws that applies to the skate park as well. Do you want to walk us through that, Jess?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I actually have a handout I'd like to pass out which provides 4 options short of closing the skate park.
And just to be clear, I'm not suggesting closing it, just allowing it to see if we can run it unsupervised.
What line is this skate park on?
It's on Schedules 3, page 2 of 4, about halfway down the top section. Schedule 3.
Oh,
Because it was not
It's noted
suggested.
skate park, the amount is $173,000, a little less than 3 positions.
Yeah, the skate park was considered by the Community Services and Parks Department as a core service, as an essential program. So we were not recommending it as a discretionary program. However, thinking through it further, there are some options that we could provide for consideration by the council. But just as background, one of the questions was whether the skate park is currently adequately legally posted with the proper signage to make it clear that persons using the skate park understand the hazardous activity of skateboarding, and we believe it is. I was there Friday night to confirm that. Currently, the skate park is open year-round, Monday through Friday. The current hours are 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., and Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., which totals 64 hours a week. And then during the summer, from June 17th through August 26th, the skate park is open Monday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., which totals 84 hours per week. Currently, the annual average number of duplicated persons using the skate park is 13,000. The unduplicated number of persons using the skate park is $7,500. The cost to operate the skate park, as we've indicated in the information that you have, is $5,615 in maintenance and operation cost and $164,000 in salaries and benefits for one full-time salaried position and 1.52 hourly positions, which is really two bodies, for a total cost of $173,000 to staff the skate park. And generally we staff the skate park with two staff persons at any given time for safety and security purposes. The options that we've outlined for you in your handout is one, to keep the same hours of operation, since it is a very popular activity and heavily used, but eliminating the salaried position and keeping only the two hourly positions and staffing the skate park with only one staff person at a time versus the two that we currently utilize. And this would be at a cost of $101,000, so that would save the general fund about $72,000 under this option. Option 2 would be to reduce the year-round hours from 64 to 43 per week, the summer hours from 84 to 63 per week, and also eliminating the salaried position and keeping only the two hourly positions. And this would cost $72,602 and save the general fund about $101,000. The third option that we've developed is to reduce the year-round hours from 64 to 43 per week, the summer hours from 84 to 63, keep the salaried position and reduce the two hourly positions to weekends only. That would cost $102,522. Then the fourth option would be to eliminate the salaried position and the two hourly positions so that there is no skate park staffing. However, we would need to retain a seasonal laborer in order to keep the leaves and the debris off of the skate park, off of the concrete, and we estimate that would cost about $13,787 per year. So those are the options that we've...
Let me ask a couple questions here just to kind of illuminate the situation. Scott, I know you sent out the section of state law that allows for immunity if you meet certain standards. As I recall, one of those seemed to imply that there'd be no skaters under the age of 12.
It provided that the immunity under the hazardous recreational activities immunity, and it's a little convoluted because the immunity starts with the health and safety code section that provides if you adopt an ordinance and you have the signs, then you have certain limited immunities, and it then tails you into 831.7 of the government code, which is hazardous recreational activities for which you're immune. It does provide that it's a limited immunity and it does not apply to skaters 12 and under.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit concerned that under any circumstance, without some level of supervision, it may be that 12-year-olds might skate, but we need to prohibit them because otherwise we wouldn't have the immunities under the law.
It's either that or set up a system where their parents would sign waivers and releases and hold harmless agreements. Again, as long as it's not for gross negligence or intentional conduct, we can do that. There's a number of cases that uphold those in the sporting events or sporting program types of contexts.
And then just what's the need in options 2 and 3 as we begin to reduce? Well, another legal question then, Scott. Can we reduce the level of supervision and rely on the immunities, or if you provide a little bit of supervision, you have to supervise 100%?
You know, there's a case that dealt with something similar out of San Diego. Not a skate park. It was a different context where the court notes it seems to be incongruous to have an immunity, but if you actually try to warn or take other additional precautions, that for some reason that would strip you of your immunity, and the courts have not been favorably disposed to increasing your liability risk where you actually do take greater precautions to try to minimize risk. So long way of saying I don't think partial supervision would increase your liability. Right. Plus, we comply with the ordinance. We've adopted the ordinance. We have the signs posted in any event. Where I think there potentially could become a problem is where the supervisor actually either engages in actual conduct which affirmatively increases the risk of harm to those using the facility, or engages in some personal conduct which exposes to liability.
So under
but just having supervision alone.
So without the supervision, maybe we would need, as a minimum, to have waivers signed by parents of 12-year-olds or under.
That's not that.
I
That's
suspect
an
you
option.
do have skaters that are under the age of 12.
They do already?
Yes, they currently sign waivers. Anyone using the skate park is signed in. They do sign waivers, and so we do monitor the participants in that manner.
And then just for options 2 and 3, what drives the reduction of hours? If we are not going to be supervising, what drives the reduction of hours?
Just options to save costs, to save staffing costs.
But we could, I mean, for example, what about an option of 64 hours during the week and 84 hours on weekend, and still limited supervision? So the cost could be the same, but why not have expanded hours? Because you're feeling there should be some level of supervision at all times?
That would be our recommendation. The degree of difficulty of our particular skate park is pretty high compared to other skate parks. We have 2 very deep bowls. How deep are they? 11 feet. So they're like the swimming pools, the backyard swimming pools, and so there is a potential for injuries. And what staff does is they are there, so when injuries are sustained, they are able to provide some aid and call an ambulance in some cases, or make sure that the families are escorted to medical attention.
But do you really need 2 people at all times to do that? I can't imagine you have that many accidents where couldn't one person do this?
Yes, Mayor Friedman, I'm going to call Gabrielle, who manages the skate park, and she could give you much more detail than I can.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm Gabrielle Golia. We typically have 2 staff on hand at all times to handle both the entry, monitoring the helmets, the pads, and also there to help clean. So in theory, we could have 1 person. However, it would put the staff person potentially at risk if a fight broke out on one side of the park and we've got kids skating on the other side of the park, being able to clear it, being able to handle the types of emergencies that do come up there.
But they could call, they can always, there's other employees in the park.
Not at that park, no.
Well, they could call the police, too.
They could call the police, yes. We've typically staffed it with 2 just for safety reasons for those staff.
Do you have a lot of fights up there?
We have fights, and we also have some drug use up in the hills. The staff are constantly handling the kids that sneak out of the park and go up into the hills and smoke marijuana. Then they try and come back into the park and skate. The staff are monitoring for that kind of behavior. So there's a lot going on there that they're trying to manage at the same time. They're working with the kid. They're at-risk youth. So they're really trying to help the kids, keep them out of trouble, as well as just monitoring a skate park.
Is it feasible to have a phone or something, a 911 number, anything happen, any kid? I know probably get abused, but where they could punch it and say we're at the skate park, or somebody just got hurt. Unless you're assuming every kid has a cell phone on them and they're responsible. I don't know.
Sure.
Probably be abused. False alarm calls.
Well, what you may want to consider, one option is leave it as it is. Frankly, it's been difficult for me, and I've expressed this to Jess, that within his department, when we're eliminating children's programs in some of the densest part of the city, that we were spending $173,000 supervising a skate park. One option would be to set a budget for the skate park that accomplishes some level of savings, and then tell the staff, minimize the supervision as you can, do as much hours as you can, but then utilize this budget to provide what minimal level of supervision you think you need to accomplish. I can understand if the group of kids is prone to the kinds of issues that were raised, it may pretty quickly degenerate to a situation where we're having to consider to close the facility altogether if you're having drug use or fights or those kinds of things happen. So it may warrant some minimal level of supervision, whether it's there all the time or whether it's checking periodically, which may require some costs. I'd hate to see us lose the facility altogether. On the other hand, just from my personal standpoint, with all the other reductions being made, $173,000 for one skate park, one activity seems to be a little high.
I remember the hearings we had for this skate
I
park.
know, that's right.
This hall was full and plus.
That's right.
So
There would be for almost any sports activity we look at, whether it's soccer or swimming or anything else. You could probably fill this room with any one of these activities.
I love the skate park, and I wouldn't support eliminating it. But if we can get away with one supervisor, I'd like to at least try it. I mean, if, like you said, if we go a few months and there's problems, we can reconsider going back. But I'm not completely convinced that we need two people there all the time. I mean, I've driven by it a lot. It's not a huge facility. I understand it's optimal, but can we still give safety and do the supervision we need to do with one person? I'd like to see if we can. It's a significant savings. And to do it, if we can do it with part-time.
So option one would be where you'd eliminate it.
Yep.
Well, I like option 4 for starters. Let's see what problems there are. You can always add people back in. You either step down or you step up. I'd rather try the worst case, eliminating, and see what kind of problem it presents.
Here's a fear after listening to staff talk about some of the issues they face. As you go to a 4, you may almost be planning for a problem. I'd suggest we look at option number 2, which saves about $100,000, still commits roughly the balance, $73,000, and ask the staff to set up a program where they can try and avoid the reduction of hours by reducing the amount of supervision. And if it's problematic, we have to come back and evaluate it.
We could also look into, I received an email from a parent, and I'm sure there's other parents out there. I don't know whether or not this would really work, but looking up into some kind of a volunteer, a parent volunteer, to at least maybe either be that second person or be the only person. A lot of cities have used volunteers really effectively, and maybe that can help fill in some of these gaps. I don't know. I don't know how active the parents are and how much they would step forward. But if we think we could mobilize a bunch of volunteers, then it may be that we can get to option 4 with staff checking in and stopping by with some kind of a parent volunteer program.
Well, here's my thoughts on it. I've been there several times. My kids have used it a few times. These aren't Boy Scouts that are sitting there using the skateboards. You've got very mature, older, very rough-looking characters, and you've got very young kids whose parents maybe think it's okay for the 6 or 7-year-old to go and just be at the skate park. And I think that mix of those types of age groups, along with the type of activities encouraged by skating culture, just open up any skating magazine, and it's, drug use, I think, is very much encouraged and idolized. The mix between those type of age groups, I think, are very problematic. So number 4, I would not go for, and I'm concerned about even dropping it down to one staffer. I think you need someone there. I mean, this is a rough group. Let me tell you, this isn't Beaver. Leave It to Beaver, from the 1950s, taking a little skateboard down the street. These are
that's where I come
hard.
from.
and I think if marijuana is the only drug that they're using, I think we're very lucky. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's ecstasy, cocaine, and all sorts of other more serious drugs going on there. So I'm very concerned about lightening up at all on what's going on there.
Yeah, well, I didn't understand because I haven't been there and used it.
It's rough.
It's rough.
And I wouldn't let my kids do it. I mean, I said no.
And forget what I said about Ford. I didn't realize that's what's going on there.
Well, I do get concerned about the age groups and the
mix.
If you have waivers for kids under 12, maybe what we want staff to do is to look at taking a budget, say number 2 or number 3, and put together a program. Maybe there needs to be, if there's supervision, maybe it needs to be of the younger kids where you have hours where only certain age levels are permitted. I mean, maybe there ought to be some hours where it's just 12 and below, and older kids aren't allowed in during those periods, and parents can know you could drop off younger kids or be supervision. Sounds like that's a bad idea, though they've tried it.
When the kids are in school, then let the adults come down.
Yes, what do you
they're
think?
supposed to work for a living, so.
Gabrielle just reminded me that Saturday mornings we do have skate time for the 12 and under group. We would, if we reduce the staffing, which we can do, we can try a different model with less staffing, whether it's one most of the time or one half the time and two half the time, and definitely reduce the hours and not be open till 10 at night, but maybe close at 8, and then have shortened hours on the weekends as well. I was there this past Friday night after the baseball game. It was about 9 o'clock at night. There must have been 25 kids skateboarding. A couple of kids were in the bowl and falling on the knee pads and sliding all the way down on their knees. There were about 20 other kids having their own contest on the rails, seeing who could stay on the longest. And then there was a group of about 5 or 6 what appeared to be older teenagers kind of lurking in the shadows near the buildings. Who knows what they were doing. But again, if we close earlier, that would mitigate a lot of that concern, and we can come up with a different model with less staffing, fewer hours, and keep the park open and keep it safe and as secure as we can.
Did we fill this with water?
Well, that's a whole other set of issues.
I have to add some pumps, but probably.
Well, maybe there are certain, like you said, certain times of day where it's more necessary to have 2. I can't imagine that for the under 12 that you're dealing with pot smoking. I would hope not. So I would still like to try reducing the number of employees there and see what happens. We're assuming the worst, but I don't know that would necessarily happen. My inclination would be to keep it open as much as you can, to give those kids a place to go. There's not a lot you can do, until that hour at night.
Yeah.
So I'd rather keep it open and see what happens, see what we can do with the staffing, and and keep us informed. And if it's looking like it's a problem, we can change back. But let's at least let's give it a try. That would be my recommendation.
Hey, Madam Mayor, council members, would you like us to target a dollar figure? Would you like us to work towards a $100,000 model or?
Yeah, personally, option 1 to me would be the option. I mean, I'd like to hear from my colleagues, but I'd like to at least give that a try, keeping the hours the same.
Yeah, I agree.
But keeping it with 2 hourly positions and try to staff as much as you can with only 1 staff person. If there are certain times of day where you're feeling that it's more necessary to have 2, we can look at that. If you need 2 at night because you're getting an older crowd or something like that.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I just want to, do we gain anything by closing it like at 8 rather than 10? I don't know if there's different elements that starts to show up. After that, most of the kids, I don't have any.
Let me suggest we let the staff work with that. And frankly, I wouldn't be so quick to say if there's problems, we'll go back to the way we used to do it, because you will have spent this money. I think there needs to be some pressure on the kids and the parents who use it that, will work with this. An option is if it becomes terribly problematic, the hours may be reduced. The park conceivably could be closed if it is as problematic as it may sound. Otherwise, there's no great incentive to have people come together and try and work to make it be successful.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The kids who use this, I'm assuming it's a lot of the same kids that are using it.
Yeah.
They need to understand that this is a resource that they're being able to use that can be taken away. And they need to take some ownership of it themselves, too, and they need to self-police as much as possible. So I don't know if there are ways that you can bring them together to have that conversation, or if there's material you can hand out to them. But I think we do need to do that outreach and that education and really make them, take that responsibility, onto their own shoulders, too.
Okay.
As long as Jess is up there, can I ask a couple questions? Jess, the CDBG support, that's in addition to the 20% that we take off from the CDBG funding for administration? That's $50,000 something?
Madam Mayor, members of City Council, yes, it is.
That's necessary?
The CDBG section currently doesn't have a administrative support position. I mean, there's no office services specialist position supporting CDBG. So the support they receive is from the central admin office in the Community Services and Parks Department, and including myself. I still have to oversee the CDBG program, and I don't charge CDBG because most of my salary comes from. Let me correct that. I charge 10% of my salary to CDBG.
Okay. Let me move on to the art and culture.
Before you do, can I ask the mayor, did we have consensus then on option 1 on the skate park?
Yeah, I'd go with 1.
Okay.
And work it out.
All right, can you just tell us what schedule you're on?
I'm on Schedule 3. these are existing programs halfway down the list on the general fund, page 2 of community development, is art and culture for $86,000. What is that, the staffer to the Arts and Culture Commission?
Yes.
Can you name me 5 things the Arts and Culture Commission has done this year?
That is so unfair.
That's a truism.
Our arts and culture staff person is currently on vacation.
That's unfortunate. but no, my point is that in this environment of cutting and slicing, and we're talking about, and our previous discussion is involving safety of minors and children, and we had previously gone through libraries. In the 6 years that I've been here on council, I don't really see a huge amount of work that the commission has done that requires this type of staffing. And that's from my work with Unity Fest, it's my work with the commemorative events. I'm just wondering if that's something that we should consider trimming back.
Well, let me step in and help Jess here, because as we talked about how to prioritize programs, I directed staff that we don't get to decide what priority a commission will be, because that's really up to the city council. If you have a commission, that's part of your core responsibility, unless the city council wants to eliminate a commission or cut it back. I think we have been in discussions for quite some time. In defense of the commission, we've now had at least 2 years or more. I'm looking at Cindy. Where's Cindy? I'll just come up here for a second, because Cindy's been part of the discussion. Remember the effort that was underway to transition to a arts council of some sort?
No, I don't remember.
Well, no, you wouldn't. But although actually, you wouldn't have been here when it started. But frankly, there was a lot of difficulty figuring out what that was. But the original theme was going to be that we'd eventually not have an Arts and Culture Commission. Then, as time went on, and we were discussing with Mr. Draymond in particular, some of the difficulty in creating a vision for what this new effort was going to be. I think if he were here today, he'd say even he came to believe that we're not sure that was a relevant structure in terms of a community council, and as a result, this Arts and Culture Commission has been in a bit of a limbo for, how long has it been? 2 years?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
Now, your staff has had discussions about if we continue to have arts and culture, and we think it does play a role in the community, what's the best place for it? And frankly, we were working toward eventually bringing you a report suggesting that the best place we believe for it is in the library. In a model that has a library expand its vision for more of the arts, culture, literacy kind of structure. Staffing for this was cut back as part of the budget 2 years ago or last year.
2 years ago, yeah.
Anticipating eventual elimination. We kept half of the funding in the commission, and then frankly we took the other half of the funding and it got put into other places as part of our budget reductions.
Can I ask Mr. Najarian a question? Are you suggesting eliminating the Arts and Culture Commission, or are you suggesting reducing the staff component?
I mean, when I think of what's arts and culture in the community, one program and organization commission that comes to my mind are the Friends of the Library. I mean, Leon Mayer gets up here every week, and they've got either a lecture, an artist, an author, dance, performance. That, I think, and I don't know if there's anyone paid on that. Maybe there's some library staff on that.
Yeah,
but
there is.
That's a heck of a lot more than the Arts and Culture Commission has done. And I'm not sure if that staffer helps you in that regard. If he or she does, then okay. Then maybe my criticism is not well placed. But I just don't see him doing anything. It was in limbo. We were going to, as you said, we were going to wipe it out. And here's a decent chunk that's in there. I mean, if it can be folded into the library and put some of that, but also generate some savings, I mean, I'd be happy. I just don't see him doing anything. And I see a lot of,
I might add.
Mr. Weaver?
No, I'm going to say I agree. That's one of 2 commissions I didn't support when they were first formed. Because a commission you form when it takes on a life of its own. It starts to suck up more and more funds out of the general fund to support it, with staff, etc. And I think it'd be better fit in the library, and I don't know if you need a commission really oversee it. We have the Glendale Arts down there. They're doing a component. Maybe the library picks up the remainder. But I just think it's a lot of, in these times, to have a whole commission doing it. Even though I like the people on the commission, it just seems it's a lot of money that could be better used. That's just my take on it.
I think one of the questions about the commission, too, is its role, and I think they have tried to do programming, and they've done it on a smaller scale. Man's in Humanity is one example, and the art tour that they do. But one thought is that we transition them to more of a advisory committee to advise on policy and direction in the arts in Glendale, whether at the library or elsewhere. But that is part of the discussion that we're going through right now.
And it's not the commission itself that is the issue here. It's the support salary to that commission that, I mean, if they were to be advisory to or folded into one of your departments or one of your divisions,
we'd still need staff
the basic
support.
question is whether or not, if we transition this over to the library, is there some savings in terms of staffing that you think you could accomplish, Cindy?
Yeah, and it's a little too soon to tell. I mean, we definitely would need staff support. I don't know at this point how much. I mean,
you can't create a commission and assume it can operate without some staff support to it. And then, as I noted back when this commission was formed, there's nothing worse than creating a commission with, either nothing for them to do or a lack of vision or no money to do something. Then they just become frustrated. And we've had that situation occur with this commission as well. So,
I mean, my thought, if it comes to the library, is that one of my existing staff people would oversee or be the liaison, but then we'd need somebody to replace that person with some of their function. And at this point, I don't know enough to know how much time that would take.
I think it's really hard to have this conversation without knowing the role of this commission, and that's really been its weakness, like you said, that there is no defined role. I mean, I think that having a commission like this that does programming, personally, I think that's a mistake. I don't think that the role of any city commission should be to put on a show. And they've done that, and they've done a good job given their resources, but we have Glendale Arts, we have Friends of the Library, like you said, we have other groups that do that. But I do think that there's an important place for a commission that sets policy that will encourage the arts and encourage culture in the city. And that's what I would like to see from this commission. I would like to see a commission that does make those kinds of policy recommendations, that helps us with programming as the Arts Fund builds up, and hopefully it will build up, that can support the groups that do the programming. And maybe maybe part of the problem in terms of resources and staffing has been that it's expensive to put on a show. It's expensive to do programming. And perhaps if they were freed up to do more policy making and more recommendations, maybe we wouldn't need, a full-time, it seems like it's a full-time staffer assigned to them. Is that correct?
That's what the number reflects.
Which to me is shocking, given a commission.
It's actually an hourly position.
Okay, but that much money for a commission that meets once a month. Yeah. I agree. I think that's really not warranted. So I don't think we're going to solve this today, but I would like staff to really take a hard look at ways of maintaining the commission, and maybe it needs to come back as a further discussion with the council about just what the role of the Arts and Culture Commission would be.
With the commissioners participating.
And we could have the commissioners participate. And I will tell you that I've had communications from at least my appointee on that commission, very long correspondence about what she believes that the role of the commission should be. So they do have thoughts, and this is a conversation that they've had. So I agree, we need to bring them in on it, but I think we should look for savings in this area. I would agree.
We have needed an opportunity to bring this whole topic back to you because we've needed to wrap up this previous effort that I think began to just diffuse and have no direction. I know Cindy has had some particular thoughts about the role of the commission, so this is a good impetus to put that together and bring it back to you. I'd suggest we just put a big question mark by this budget item for now, and then we'll come back to you this summer and have a broader conversation and share some thoughts with how we think this might work.
And this input is really good because actually we had a meeting planned at the end of this month with planning and parks and library and city manager's office to discuss exactly what we're talking about right now. And then we're planning to come back to you in July or August.
We think there's an opportunity there with to begin to also then frame this broader vision for a library, which goes beyond kind of traditional library roles more to what it's evolved to being. So I think there's an opportunity here, and we can come back and share that with you. Just putting a question mark by this one for now, then.
Okay. Mr. Weaver?
On the list, making my pitch again for the Rose Float, trying to save that. The Rose Float Association raises around $50,000 every year to contribute, and even Joe, Jess, and I don't agree. I don't think staff is spending over $30,000 in support of a $100,000 float. I heard talk about maybe it fits better over in economic development because its ability to go worldwide is a very cheap sell for us to get attention for Glendale. And I think there's ways to get corporate sponsorships in the city to get that money for the float. So I'd like to give it a shot wherever. After 98 years, I'd hate to see it go down. It's an integral part of Glendale. We've lost too many Glendale things. Days of the Verdugo, go down a laundry list of things we used to, the parade all disappeared. The float has been able to hang on. So I think it's worth about $50,000 in our funds, not 138 or whatever.
Mr. Starbird?
Yeah, we have shared with you some thoughts that Phil Lanzafame developed on the float as an economic development tool, with some justification on how this could be funded from economic development funds, which are limited because they're redevelopment. So, in 2015, that source of funding could go away. But I think part of the difficulty is we talk about this as if it's a $50,000 commitment, but actually the city signs for the entire contract for the float. Then we have to depend on the volunteers to raise the money. Mr. Weaver knows firsthand how difficult that is, but they've been successful every year doing that. But there's been some questions in more recent years whether they're going to continue to be able to come up with the matching funds to keep this at direct cost of $50,000. And the city signs the contract. So we're on the hook for the full cost of the float. Maybe this is one of those that we need to sit down with the people involved with the Rose Float Association and the staff and really come to grips with the fact that I know they've had their struggles. Can they raise the money? Can they get corporate sponsors? What's the likelihood that if we continue this, and if you all can justify doing it through economic development funding, that it can really be a commitment of the $50,000 and not be something more than that? Can the group really take over the kind of staff support that's caused Jess to say that the total cost of this effort is really more than $50,000 for the city? Or are we just going to be shifting it to a different funding source, but we're still going to have staff having to work and manage the activities? If the volunteer group can really take those things on and all we're really doing is making a dollar contribution, then it's probably justified to look at this as an economic development tool. But if it continues to take staff support of the tune that it has historically, and if we're going to have questions about the group's ability to raise the kind of funding support they need for it, then that should be part of your decision making.
But you won't know that till after the fact. If we have a year to run it, the way they say they're going to raise the money, and I'd like to see the costs for support of the float listed, because I don't think it's 30-some thousand staff time. Keep a record of hours and dollars spent on support so we know what the city is putting into it. The others, you run it the year. If it fails, then on the 99th year, you kiss it goodbye. But, you're hearing things, but there's nothing substantial to prove one way or the other until we give it a try.
Well, before we start keeping time cards, I think it'd be pretty easy to sit down with the members of the Rose Float Association and Mr. Weaver and the staff who manage it and talk about the activities that we manage, and can those reasonably be taken over by the volunteers?
And talk with the Phoenix Decorating, because they don't believe the costs either.
And frankly, what's the viability of getting corporate sponsors for this? I think Mr. Weaver has noted he thinks that's quite viable to get corporate sponsors for the float. Yes. I don't know. And at the end, if they're not active, then the staff does continue to manage various aspects of this, including supporting the association. If there's a view that the group can take these on and relieve the department, and all it really becomes is your economic development program making a contribution and the Rose Float Association is really doing all of the work, then you may conclude it's worthwhile. You may conclude it's worthwhile anyway. But I think we need to have that kind of a discussion to see if it can really work. Staff's view is, with the nature of all the other reductions being made, it's hard to continue to justify in this economic environment this kind of continued contribution as a core program. I mean, Jess is being very honest. The Rose Float, in their view, is not a core program of the department, but you may still view it as being very critical. Our view is we think it can be justified at least the tune of the $50,000 or $55,000 as an economic development tool, because as Phil's noted in his evaluation, as an advertising tool for Glendale, you get a tremendous amount of impressions that you'd normally spend multiples of that much money to get by the Rose Float, and it has been going on for a long time.
I wouldn't say it's essential. I'd say it's priority because of its history. Essential has a certain terminology to it. It says you can't live without it. It's essential. But it is a priority. It has been for 98 years, so a lot of councils have supported that.
I'd love to hear comments from my colleagues.
Well, nothing lives forever. That's the first thing we always have
So we
to
all
think.
pass on.
And just because we've done something, we should always judge it on its merits and not just based on history or the longevity of something. I don't know. How much exposure do we get? I know last time we got about 2 seconds of visual, and you're at the end of the parade.
We got about 30 seconds. We were in, believe it or not, the last third of the parade has the highest listening audience. Not the first half even. It's the last third has the highest. We've been in that area, most of them. A Super Bowl, 30 seconds on a Super Bowl game is worth multi-millions of dollars. So.
Okay, but let's say it's a TV commercial. I mean, let's say it's as obvious and open and as visible as a TV commercial is. If we had this budgeted for a TV commercial, would we decide that it's still in our best interest to do it in light of all the other cuts that we're doing? That's what that's the pain that we're feeling. We're struggling with programs from A to Z, and
Well, it also gets about 600 kids on the average community service hours every year, too. I don't know what that means. That's school, and therefore you don't count it, but...
Madam Mayor, if I can, as a general fund expenditure, I understand the difficulty. And in the notes to you, what I try to convey is if you were to use this as an economic development tool, you would want to slightly modify how we go about it. For instance, right now we rely on Channel 5 or Channel 7 or whoever to comment on the float. We may want to get with a production company ahead of time and say, this is the message that we want to convey. You will, as you watch the Super Bowl, you will see Pepsi and whoever, Tostitos, they're on over and over, and they're getting a lot of exposure. Can't afford to do that. We got one shot at this. That's where I think the longevity, the 99 years, there are people that watch this every year, and after 99 years, they oh, Glendale, again. So it's not a typical advertising, but there are some tweaks that we'd want to do. Another question for you is if you do this as an economic development model, do you want to hitch your horse, if you will, to a corporate sponsor? As I noted in my note to you, the Rose Bowl just recently went through this. They were the last bowl to just be the Rose Bowl. Now I think it's Honda. So they're the Rose Bowl presented by Honda. Do you want to be associated with a corporate sponsor in exchange for those dollars to help do this? Now, if it is somebody like the Americana brand or the Glendale Galleria, perhaps that leverages us even further because now we're giving a promotion for Glendale as well as for the Americana. That's purely a decision for this council to make.
Dave, can you do that in the class that we're in the parade? I mean, can a municipality that has a spot, can they do a corporate sponsor like that?
I don't know. A lot of the floats in the parade, of course,
Right, or corporate.
are corporate. So there's not that many cities left and I don't know any of them to do it corporate, but if the Tournament of Roses can do it, I think it'd be pretty hard for them to tell us that a city entry can't be sponsored by a big corporation in the city that it's in.
I wonder whether...
Where's the funding for this?
It shows up there on your schedule
Schedule
2, about a
two.
third of the way
Events?
down.
Schedule
events,
2,
Rose
special
Float.
events.
Rose Float.
Yeah, special events, Rose
So it's
Float.
one of the ones being slated for elimination?
Yeah, it's $131,000 cost, $50,000 revenue. Mr. Weaver takes issue with the $30,000 in staff support, but regardless of the dollar amount, there is staff support that has been there, whether it's managing tickets, working with the Rose Float Association, or what have you.
Regardless of what the rules have been for the Rose Bowl in the past about corporate sponsorship, I would think that since they're having so much trouble getting cities to participate, they might be a little more flexible with those rules. In my mind, if we were going to do this as a economic development tool is under that umbrella, I would want to see it really be very targeted and use our community branding and really be used in that respect, because in the past, the float says Glendale, but it hasn't really been aimed at, as being an advertisement. It's been a source of community pride. I think if it does go into that department, it needs to really change its focus a lot. But I would like to see us explore corporate sponsorship so that this doesn't cost anything to the city. It's a great thing, and the community does take pride in it, but at this time, when we're talking about cutting programs for children in the parks, I do think it's a luxury. And it's, those children, those young people who participate do have that great experience of participating, but there's a lot of ways you can get volunteer time and do things in the community that are, that young people can do. And, at the end of the day, this is something that, does last one day, and it is a great source of pride for that time when it's shown and the community does rally behind it. But the community also has to understand what's on this list of programs for elimination, and that we're talking about not having penny carnivals in the park for young children. We're talking about not having a lot of the contract classes, about not doing special events here in Glendale. And so it's all a trade-off. It's not that we don't love the Rose Float. I mean, I went to the Rose Parade last year. I felt tremendous pride when I saw that float go by. But I personally would give that up to be able to provide more services for young children. That's just where I put my priorities. So if we can do corporate sponsorship, if we can raise more money to do it, that would be terrific, and I'd like to see us look at that.
Maybe Forest Lawn will since you plugged them so well anyway.
Dead man slam. It's a question that the contract has to be signed soon because they have to get building it now. They have some 20 floats they have to build. And if you wait to see what you can work out, there is a deadline by the Tournament of Roses Association where you can get an entry in after it. So
This is already June.
Are there any
usually our float is built by April.
No, the contract's on my desk. We do have a Parks Commission meeting on the 20th of this month. They're going to review and approve the design,
And bring it to us.
and then we'll be ready to execute the contract. And
Are there any savings that can be obtained through, I know there's the float company, and maybe, is there an entrance fee or something to the...
we already paid the entrance fee. It was $5,000. The cost of the float actually went up by $4,000. It's up to $99,000.
We get more than the average float our size gets in the parade. We get a break because we're totally self-decorated. We're all done by Glendale volunteers, so we get more of a float than Norm gets.
Yeah, we get about all you can get for the amount of money that we spend.
And there are things like staff has to pass out the T-shirts and log them. That's not a city. That is a Rose Float. There's a number of other things that are not the cost of the city. Association has to do it. Somebody's got to kick them in the rear and tell them to do it.
Mr. Manukian, do you have any comments?
In general, I support the Rose Float. I think it's a great tradition for the city of Glendale, but we do need to look at alternatives, and I'm willing to look at alternatives. Even helping them raise funds or get corporate sponsorships. I think that's. But in general, I'm not in favor of eliminating it.
Let me a suggestion. What if we took this to the basic cost of the float? In other words, no more staff support. The association is going to have to manage their events, their activities, in a way that it relieves the staff of having to do that. We look at this as an economic development activity. So to the extent that we can have some interplay this year on the design, which is probably already set, I don't know, but the design's pretty well set. But to the extent that we can, we do. You commit a year of economic development, and this has to be a year of exploring whether or not this float can become self-supporting.
That's what I said. So you're either makes it or breaks
I knew
it.
I heard it somewhere.
It'll make it or break it.
And again, we're discussing an item that has considerable support in the community with a lot of individuals who participate. I would like to get input from them as well as to what they can and they can't do. For us to say, well, you have to do this or it's bust, it's just not reasonable without really getting their input.
Well, sorry. Go on, Mr. Jerry.
I don't want to open up the old can of worms here, but there used to be a large fundraiser. Was the
Yes, mine.
and
Mine.
did we shut you down or what?
Well, Dreamy Roses Incorporated does exist, but I stopped it temporarily because of the economy. I had 45, 50 restaurants that came free of charge. Never paid a penny to bring their food in. Restaurants are hurting, losing business 30-40%. Sponsors, I had over 70 sponsors. How many sponsors today are going to hand out money in these times? Now, they were small sponsors. Ones that we're talking about going to are corporate level. The Nestle's, DreamWorks, Disney's, Americana Brand, Galleria. If between them all, they can't cough up $50,000, something is wrong. I think as an economic tool benefiting the city that they are headquartered in.
Can we put like Shrek on the float and Mickey Mouse on the float?
No, you can't do that without their approval.
It would be
the year
offered
before
to-
I started was Mickey Mouse was on the float in a magician's.
Mr. Najarian, to respond to that would be my guess that if you do want to partner with somebody, please, Mr. Weaver, correct me if I'm wrong, they're going to need something. The Walt Disney Company already has a presence in the parade, but if it were DreamWorks, maybe it's the logo somewhere on the Rose float, and as they go by, the City of Glendale sponsored by DreamWorks. But it will be something to where we partner with them, and there's going to need to be some exposure, unless you go something of a
Not
Dream
necessarily,
Roses,
because
where
I
they-
had $10,000 sponsors. They didn't get it, but I had a series of recognitions they could get. We would buy tickets for two to the parade and to the football game. They were in a program, in the Tournament of Roses program, their logo, whatever, and reception, other things. It was a number of things. I never had one say, well, what do we get in return other than that, what I had on that
I
list.
was referring to a large sponsorship. If they were to make
That's
a
different.
$75,000 contribution, that's what I was
That's
referring
different.
Okay, so just to bring this conversation to a close, I think the consensus is that we would like to find a way to continue the Rose float, but that we would really like to find corporate sponsors if possible, to maybe rely more on the fundraisers and the volunteers than we have in the past, and try to reduce the financial impact on the city. So as quickly, I think, as we can enter into some of those conversations, the better. And I'm not exactly sure who would do that outreach, in terms of corporate sponsorship. I don't know if redevelopment would do that, or who would.
If I can, I think we need to quickly test whether or not the Rose Float Association has the wherewithal in their mind to step up and provide more of the administration and management of the float, with this being more like a contribution from the city as opposed to the other way around.
Okay.
Mr. Weaver knows this activity inside and out, and maybe with some of his help we can get a sense fairly quickly whether or not this is going to work.
I've got ideas.
As a minimum, my suggestion would be leave this event at $100,000 with a $50,000 revenue and eliminate the $30,000 staff support. That makes it an economic development activity, not a staff-driven activity. It literally becomes, we make a contribution to an economic development tool. We don't necessarily do it as management of, an activity.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, if I may, I was just talking to Ross. We can prepare an instruction manual and outline every step that's required from start to finish to manage the Rose Float, and provide that to the group, including the Rose Float Association, so they can see exactly what's required to to manage this, and then they can react to that.
Fine.
Okay.
So what does that mean for today?
Are there more questions for Jess about his department while he's there?
What does that mean? Is the float in or out?
So, yeah, I was just going to ask, just to be clear, we have the reduction here is a net of 81,000. So we'll leave that in and explore other opportunities with economic development.
And we'll talk.
Okay.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we're doing
This one has a semi-question mark, but, okay. Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Mr. Duran?
No.
So are we okay with the,
As I said, on the very first day of the budget, I could have bounced the budget in 30 minutes because I knew the hundreds of hours staff had been putting in. You know, the main thing that I've discovered over all the study sessions is the library. That was the one department we really went after in terms of restoring the library openings. The others, most of the discretionary across the line, I can't remember much discussion on exchange, trying to save this or take this out. Parks and Rec has been, library have been the two. And those two programs are the ones that people interact with. If we had eliminated a $10 million storm drain project, there'd be nobody in this room objecting to us removing it because people don't interface with it. When you're cutting the library out and people use it, or they're using the skateboard park, and those are the people, then they show up. So I think we've gone a long way of getting most of it done already.
Jess, in your section, which positions would result in a layoff? Do you know offhand? Or how many positions offhand? You've got 13.6 full-time equivalents. I know a good portion of that's hourly people who still lose
Yes.
their jobs potentially.
It would be 3 full-time salaried positions, and the balance would be hourly positions.
And those 3 are all filled?
Yes.
Okay.
okay, let's move on. And just to my colleagues, if you want to recall somebody, we can certainly go back and bring up
Ooh,
any
we
of the
have that
staff
privilege?
members if we need to.
Recall them to the stand.
Oh, so Jess can't leave, is that right?
No, Jess can't leave.
Okay.
Nobody can leave. No one's running the city today.
Somebody's leaving.
Okay, Chief Scoggins, welcome.
Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and members of the council and city staff. Harold Scoggins, Fire Chief. On the sheet that you have before you today, that represents 2.75 positions. One of those positions is our 40-hour arson investigator that I explained to you during the budget study session. One is our public education coordinator, and the other one is a half of a position for our PIO's position. The .25 represents hourly positions that assist us with teaching CERT and our junior fire program, and that represents the $426,000 on the screen today.
So, Chief, there are 2 positions then with bodies in them? Are 2 layoffs?
Our 40-hour arson position became vacant as of last week.
Okay.
The individual retired.
So the other one is still filled?
Our public education coordinator has made a decision to leave the city, so that position will be vacant in early July. And
Chief, let's talk for a minute about CERT.
Yes.
This is a program that's popular in the community, but also in an area that's disaster-prone, like Glendale, with earthquakes and fires and who knows what else. I feel better knowing that there are people around the community trained in a disaster. Is there any way of continuing this program, whether it's contracting it out or sending people to some other program somewhere else that will give them a similar type of education? Is there anything that we can offer?
yes, what the plan is, with the balance of the PIO's position, that the PIO and Emergency Services Coordinator are currently one position today. The half position left, we're going to move forward with hiring a civilian person to become our Emergency Services Coordinator, our Public Information Officer, and our Public Education Coordinator. And what we're going to do with our hourly funding that we have left is we're going to carve out pieces of the hourly funding so we can continue to provide a certain level of cert. It may not be the level that we had in the past, but the goal will be to continue to provide classes in cert.
Excuse me, I just lost a quorum.
Oh.
So, okay,
I didn't look around.
we're back on. We're legal again.
Before the door closed, I heard you. Sorry.
Okay.
So
Well,
that-
I'm glad to hear it, because I would really hate to see CERT go. I think it's really important to keep the community educated about what to do in an emergency.
We agree.
Okay.
Do we also want to talk about our additional savings that aren't on the screen? I don't know if that should come later or if that should come now. We also have another $1 million in savings, and $500,000 would come from the general fund, and another $500,000 would come from the reduction of the transfer to our paramedic fund, and that's with the transition of our EMS program to all BLS units.
Anyone want to discuss that or make comments or ask questions at this point? Okay.
I think we've discussed it enough, and I've made my position clear on that.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next.
Well, I'm sorry, that result, so how many positions, Chief, how many positions could be involved in layoff then? One? They're both vacant?
The public education coordinator's position is filled, but it will become
Okay.
vacant in early July. The PIO EOC position, which is joint, that person will be moved back to our operations section.
So it doesn't result in any layoffs?
No
Okay.
layoffs.
All right.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, members of council, here representing Human Resources, and as per our original presentation, we don't have a great deal of programs in the traditional sense. We're looking at non-essential services. The primary area that we look at is training, and what we've put forth are some training cuts in the employee training and development program, and courses and classes that we feel are expendable that don't cut into our core services relative to succession planning, as well as some of the other really important areas like harassment, diversity training, and things like that. So what we put forth is, again, various levels of cuts amounting for a total of about $40,000, and after the cost allocation, it amounts to about $27,000. So with that, if you have questions or concerns, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Well, the library again.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. Our reductions include closing the bookmobile, some elimination of some small-scale programming, 2 vacancies, and some staff efficiencies, rearranging full-time staffing so that we can use less hourly staff. So we would lose 2 full-time positions that are vacant and about 2.5 FTE part-time.
Okay, I think we discussed the library pretty extensively.
Thank you.
Are there any last-minute questions?
You're not closing any libraries, are you? Just so we're clear.
No, we're very fortunate. We are not closing any libraries.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks to City Council.
Okay, who's next?
Management Services, Madam Mayor. For Management Services, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, what we will see in terms of reductions that's before you is 1 full-time reduction of a filled management position, 1 full-time reduction of a vacant non-management position, and an hourly, 0.5 FTE reduction of an hourly position. We believe that based on these reductions, because of some reorganizational efforts that we've had in the Management Services Department between 6 and our graphics sections, we do not see any significant service level impacts as a result of these reductions.
Which position are you laying off?
The position that will be laid off is within the GTV6 department as a management position, and that individual has actually decided to do other things outside of the city of Glendale and has other plans, actually, to go back to school and pursue some other dreams. So it's going to work out.
It's not a layoff.
not necessarily a layoff, correct?
To mutually agreed upon.
Yeah, mutually agreed upon separation.
Any comments for Management Services? Okay. I believe Police is next.
Madam Mayor, members of council, as we discussed earlier, our proposed cuts will start with the reallocation of a sworn lieutenant's position to a civilian administrator, and that position currently oversees our Communications and Technology Bureau. We are also, as part of our recommendation, looking at eliminating one investigative assignment within our Detective Bureau that is responsible for investigating and filing misdemeanor cases. So we will do a reorganization within investigative services to accomplish that task or those specific cases elsewhere. And then finally, although we don't have many discretionary services left, the remaining ones there, as you see, are related to the STAR program, the Police Athletic League programs, and there are two under that, both boxing and equestrian, our Explorer program, and those are all basically overtime supported, along with funding from CDBG that has also been reduced. So we're recommending the elimination of those, along with one volunteer program coordinator. That's an hourly position now, and we propose to accomplish that task actually with volunteer personnel specifically. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Mr. Starber?
In fairness to Mr. Quintero, who's not here, I know if he were here, as he has in the past, I know he would bring up the issue of PAL and STAR program, particularly PAL, which I think he's been particularly supportive of. Just to remind everybody, I know most of you have been here in past years. Rafi, even back in your days when we went through some budget cuts, he was always very quick to defend those programs. So just a reminder of that.
And the Explorer program, isn't that where you get some of the local kids to be acclimated with police work and see if they're interested in it? Is that going to hinder your efforts to recruit from the local population?
Councilman Manukian,
population from our community.
That is correct.
Say local population as if there's a population out there.
From
the Glendale community.
Absolutely, and we have employed a long-term kind of grow-your-own recruitment strategy over the last decade that starts with bringing kids from our diverse community into Explorers, moving them on then into our cadet program, which is designed to facilitate college attendance while working part-time, and then ultimately into the ranks of the police department. We've had great success with that over the years. But as I mentioned to you folks earlier, we've been in a 3-year hiring freeze. We haven't recruited, so those efforts have waned somewhat. And with past budget cuts, we have all but eliminated our cadet program.
That's not good.
It's not good.
So budget, maybe we should agendize something that we can do to reinstate it or supplement it or do something that is an alternative to the cadet program, because I think that's an important program to get high school kids to be interested in police work, our local high school kids. So.
Absolutely, and we'd be happy to look at alternative strategies with you on that.
Other comments? Okay, thank you.
If I may interrupt, so for police, the cuts as proposed are okay.
You want us to say no?
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to keep make sure.
Maybe I missed it. Were there any layoffs involved with this, with your positions? I know not. Okay.
There are no layoffs.
Okay. Very good.
Yes, Mr. Elliott, the cuts we're accepting regrettably, And we would love to explore with the police department ways of continuing a cadet program and also the Pal and Star program at a reduced cost. But we'll have those talks, I think, ongoing. Okay? Mr. Zerny?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, just to recap our proposal, it includes 12.6 positions. That's a combination of the elimination of vacant, one filled position, 10 vacancies, one filled position, and the shift of the full-time equivalent of 1.6 positions to non-general fund operations. Primarily, these are engineers who are in the management level and who are involved in the CIP process, is to shift a portion of their time out of the general fund. So again, it's 10 vacant positions, one filled position, one layoff, and the full-time equivalent of 1.6 in funding shift.
Mr. Zern, we had talked at one point, I see the Adopt a Highway program on here. We had talked about really utilizing corporate efforts in some of that respect and leveraging what are the great position people have that companies might have in terms of advertising with, our on and off ramps. Did we ever look into that and whether we could continue this with sponsorship without it having to cost the staff money?
Well, Madam Mayor, in the interim, I'm going to shift this to another non-general fund operation because in going back over it, I think it's critical. If you saw how much we collect off our ramps, and we have a lot of ramps in Glendale, 50-plus ramps, and just doing it 2 times a month, you would be amazed at what we collect.
I didn't realize that you were shifting it. I saw it here and assumed it was proposed for elimination.
It was proposed for elimination, Madam Mayor, and I just mentioned as I was thinking out loud when I presented it to you, I said I was going to look for some alternatives, and this is one that I'm able to shift it to a non-general fund operation. However, we would still like to pursue the possibility of pushing the Adopt a Highway program with some of our corporate folks. And previously when we looked at it, the concept is that the corporation would actually provide some level of their employees to help do the collection, and that's just really, really difficult. So if we can present to them, we have this firm that's fully permitted, they do a great job, if you could simply contribute something to this, and then we can work with Caltrans to get the signage up so that it does say, whatever it may be, whatever company it may be, to give them that level of recognition. So yeah, we'll still continue to pursue that, but I can salvage this program because I just, from a personal standpoint and from, I think, a community cleanliness standpoint, those ramps are filthy. I mean, they just are. It just is a huge collection.
I don't know how you'd get up and down the ramps to the trash if we weren't collecting it. It's an amazing amount of trash, which caused us to start this program in the first place because we couldn't get a response from Caltrans. Hard as we tried, including getting our legislators to beat on them, they just don't have the money. So they can't keep up with their own landscaping, and they certainly can't pick up trash. And they were becoming deplorable. I mean, they may seem relatively bad now, but they're in very good condition compared to what they used to be.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. This is an old issue, then.
Oh yeah. We've dealt with this for years.
That's when you started picking up the trash.
Right.
I don't know if it was 05, 06, or...
That's about right.
Yeah.
And we came to council to get the approval and went through the long saga of what we tried, as Mr. Starbird said, to get our legislators and everyone else. I can guarantee you today Caltrans is in much worse shape than they were 6 or 7 years ago. I mean, they don't even their lighting, they can't even keep up on their roadway lighting.
Yeah, you see them building beautifully landscaped extensions of freeways, and in 5 years they're going to look just like ours, full of weeds, and landscaping will just about be gone. It's really quite amazing.
Mr. Najarian?
So, question on and Mr. Howard can perhaps chime in. For vehicle code violations, majority of those fines and penalties go to the state and to the courts. But for municipal code violations, we retain the bulk of that, don't we? So I'm thinking if people are littering on those on-ramps or off-ramps, we may be well advised to start issuing citations based on a municipal code violation, which would generate, and we're talking about generating revenues and keeping the on-ramps clean, off and on-ramps clean. Is there something that would, Scott, in terms of retaining the revenue on a municipal code violation, is that something that
It's really going to depend on the classification of the on-ramp or the off-ramp. If the on-ramp or off-ramp is considered to be a state highway or a portion of state highway, we could not use our municipal code to cite for littering. We have to cite for littering under the vehicle code.
Can we send Caltrans the bill?
And actually, there's some options that perhaps we can resurrect to discuss. I know up in Northern California, and it was less so with the on and off ramps and more so with just the freeways and how that fell into such a state of just poor quality maintenance that one of the cities, I believe it was Oakland or Berkeley, I believe it was Oakland, that actually instituted legal action for nuisance.
I was going to say, we have
Caltrans. They
neighborhood
ultimately
services.
settled that.
If a private property in Glendale got to that condition, neighborhood services would go in and they would file a criminal complaint, right?
They would seek correction, and if ultimately it wasn't, they would come to us. The difficulty with another governmental agency is the intergovernmental immunity for criminal. But there is this possible option, and again, it ultimately resulted in settlement, so we don't have any legal precedent that Caltrans is going to be ultimately held responsible to another, I'll call it an inferior or perhaps lateral public agency such as a city for creating a public or maintaining a public nuisance. But it's something that was tried and ultimately resulted in a settlement. As I recall, we may still have a file on that. The settlement was, I think it was use our best efforts to try to continue to clean up the freeways. It wasn't anything that mandated a specific time frame or a specific level of cleanliness.
It wasn't a chunk of money.
No, there was no money involved. I think Caltrans kind of got the message that they needed to do a better job of cleaning the freeway in this particular area. I believe it was Oakland again. I believe we have a copy of the complaint and the settlement agreement in our files.
And surprisingly, they have come through and renovated landscaping, but then it's like the maintenance stops. So you renovate landscaping, they clear out dead brush, they do a lot of work, and then it dies again.
They did the 134 corridor, and they put new irrigation in with reclaimed water, and that's probably the last time we've seen them.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Except now they're on the 5 doing that.
Yes, we've seen them there.
Yes. Madam Mayor, members of the council, there was a couple of other programs. Not huge amounts of money, and ones, again, that concerned me. One was our litter abatement program that we used GYA help to do. So I'm actually looking for a non-general fund source for that. And then there was the flag program that obviously isn't a priority, but I think that we all like to see the flags hanging we've got the program down from literally a six-figure cost to something that's much more manageable. It's just where it fell on our list. It's not a priority core service, but something I think that's really not just nice to have. I think it's important, and so I believe I can find. I'm not sure where, but I'm looking to see if we can salvage that program.
So Steve, is it on your list someplace? Because I was expecting to see it too. Where on your list of reductions?
I have it on, Mr. Starbird.
Is that on the chopping block, or that's on the...
We put it on the reduction. It was in our reduction scenario.
I just don't know which. Is it one of these items on here? I don't see it on the list for reductions.
Well, I think in this, where it would be listed, Mr. Starbird, is within the operation. So it would be our traffic safety operation within maintenance services. I don't know. I have in my presentation a specific list. It's a $33,000 a year program.
And we had talked the last time you came in about approaching the Patriotism Committee or some of the other local
absolutely.
Schools.
We're still going to do that.
Steve, we seem to be coming up on a time when we're going to start needing to replace the flags. And so that was a pretty expensive.
It's absolutely correct. We've got the hanging part of it in a very manageable place right now with a contractor who does it for us. And as you see, we've consolidated. We put the flags up for Memorial Day. We leave them up for Flag Day, and we'll leave them up through the 4th of July. So you don't have the up and down costs for the installation and the removal. But what that does do is it lessens the life of the flag. And so Mr. Starbird's right. And that's actually, Madam Mayor, what I was going to approach the Patriotism Committee about, is assisting us along, not just the Patriotism Committee, because I think in the corporate world in Glendale in general and other social clubs, buying flags to fly in the city, I think that's a solid thing, and I think folks would support that. So we'll go out, and we haven't tested those waters yet, but we'll go out and see what kind of results we get.
We take them down for Labor Union Day? Labor Day? And
Labor Day, they stay up. I think for Labor Day, we put them up, and that stays through to Patriot Day, September 11th.
You know, it occurs to me we're planning to go to corporate Glendale with a lot of requests. We need to streamline this and maybe go to them with a menu option. Instead of having one department go to somebody and another department go to somebody, we're going to be extremely annoying to them.
What we can do for them. You know,
What we can do, I think going to them with sort of a menu of different opportunities for them to be involved in the community, and let's make sure that it's coordinated, because otherwise they're just never going to want to hear from us again.
But yeah, I'll work with Mr. Lanza.
Steve, among your 12.6 positions, how many are likely layoffs?
One.
Okay, any other comments for Mr. Zern?
What kind of layoff is it?
Position? Engineering aide. It manages a counter in our engineering division, and we're going to just incorporate that into our clerical staff.
Okay, thank you.
I count 6, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, 6 total among the departments you've talked about. 6 positions subject to layoff. Again, we'll work very hard to try and transition people into other positions to the extent that we can. What's next? Is that it? Oh, I see. Jason's been keeping track.
Okay, are we finished, or was there anything else from staff?
Well, I was going to try and do a real quick update.
Okay, that's fine. Oh, yeah, and I do have a card. Why don't I go to the public while you're getting all of that together? Thank you.
Like tabulating the results.
I have one card, Herbert Milano.
You have 2 cards.
Mayor Friedman, members of the City Council, my name is Herbert Milano. The trends that I perceive in the discussions today and in the past several sessions are as follows. 1, reduction to the public services, services rendered to the public, reduction in the staffing of low-level employees. 3, increased fees to the public. 4, discussion of budget items that comprise a fraction of 1% of the budget. 5, the search for volunteers, donations, and corporate sponsorship to make up the shortfall. What I don't see discussed, and I believe should be considered, is 1, addressing the staffing level trends in full-time employees by department across the years, either from 5 years or 10 years ago. 2, comparing the staffing levels to the activity levels of the business units. For example, the number of transactions or the participation levels for various different programs. 3, the public benefit levels that were in 2000, $18 million for pension, medical, and workers' comp, to adjusted for inflation, $22 million, to what it is today, $43 million. It is my belief that a report should come back to the City Council with a full-time equivalent comparison by department, by business unit, from accounting year 2000 to accounting year 2010. Remember that the population hardly changed. In fact, it declined since the year 2000. We should also review the ratio of managers to subordinates for each of the business units. In the past 10 years, or from 1998 to 2008, you had an increase of mid-level and upper-level management of 90 more employees in just those 2 levels. If you were to reduce as follows, reduce the management levels back to 2000, you would save about $15 million. If you reduce the benefit levels to 2000 year levels adjusted for inflation, you'll save $22 million. If you then contract with private paramedics, as you have prior to 1998, and maybe contract with the county for fire services, you save tens of millions of dollars more. I think that those are the primary large-scale, major structural changes that if you were to make it, it solves the problem, not just for now, but for many years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Aram Kazazian is my last card.
Let's show the video.
Yeah, my name is Aram Kazajan. What I have a video of what is costing this city and the public to read the smart meters. The smart meters are $2.5 million a year for IT program to read the smart meters. Go ahead. I want to see it.
Which will recognize where the situation we're in today, which is a lot.
Part of the general fund.
The amount that you would have paid to replace the water meters.
We included that in there as if.
And what about the operational costs? What's the difference between the smart meters and the not smart meters per year?
There's a bump. There's an initial bump for the next 2 years, where, in fact, you heard earlier Mr. Frega describe the IT expenditures. What we have recognized is that this is a significant IT undertaking. Along with the utility undertaking, it's a partnership with IT, very close, and it's worked well. And there's a significant expenditure associated with that. I think you saw about a $900,000 expenditure this morning from Mr. Frega, which is ongoing, and that will be part of our ongoing maintenance of that system, and it's critical to it, there's no question. In addition to that, there is a need for additional technical expertise, and our departments together have recognized that we need the equivalent of about 6 additional people to operate the technical and the IT-related processes associated with smart grid. Now, all that is probably about another $1 million plus or minus. That's what it's going to cost ongoing to operate it. So figure another $2 to $2.5 million a year. Now, on the other side.
The other side. Wait, what about the other side?
Well,
that's not us.
The other side is you can provide your videos into your home. You can watch your power. You can save power. That's what it is. And who cares about that? We have $2.5 million. Now, $2.5 million, we stopped reading the meters. We already have the 12 employees that read it at $800,000 a year. We're already paying for them. If we can take that $800,000 a year, keep those employees for the next 2 years, and eliminate the reading the meters with an IT program, that's $2.5 million. We can keep our libraries open. We can keep the Rose Float going. We can keep the parks open. Everything could be open, stay open, and that $2.5 million could be saved, postpone it for about 3 years, then come back and do it. There's your $2.5 million money you want it. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to point out that I don't think that money would be general fund money, even if it was saved, so it couldn't be used for this. But we understand your point.
Unless he's advocating a greater transfer from the power utility to the general fund, which is contrary to
that is what he's advocating, because that's the only way you could do that.
Or perhaps from the water fund, which has been objected to and threatened with legal action if we continue that. So that's the problem. Either we transfer it, which people are very upset about the transfer, or...
It's already an IT program, so that's part of the...
Mr. Starbird.
Unless there's responses from the council, I'm going to make some concluding kind of wrap-up comments here, if it's okay. Jim?
Does anybody else have any comments? Okay.
Okay. Well, I guess we have an updated number. Kind of like watching the Academy Awards.
Now, this is updated based on our conversation that we had today.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, members of the council, we've added, Mr. Bradford and his trusty computer have added back in the savings from the reduction of the skate park. So we're now at a projected $115,000 surplus, assuming all the cuts and all the other additional strategies.
So the question I have then, assuming that number is correct, is that number, are we comfortable enough with that number to go back and reallocate it to different programs, or you're saying just hold it right there, you know, we've met the bar, things may fall?
Well, let's keep in mind $115,000 on a budget of $162 million is
pretty close.
Than 0.1%.
Okay, so you're
yes. It doesn't take much of a burp in any of those numbers. I'd encourage you to keep this where it is, frankly, unless there's something that you feel very strongly about. Some of these we've tried to be relatively conservative in all of our projections, but I will tell you we have some softness in these numbers. I continue to be very concerned about the fact that we're relying on $3 million in hiring freeze savings. We haven't in previous years yet had that number as something we're actually counting on. It's been a cushion. And this year, we need to have that number come to pass. You heard Steve describe 10 positions that are eliminated that were previously part of our hiring freeze. So figure there's anywhere between $700,000 and $1 million of the hiring freeze that we couldn't count on because we've counted already in his reductions. So that number is going to be harder and harder to come by. If any of the revenue projections are off, if any of the estimates on our strategies are off, if we can't implement some of our fees by July 1, we're going to lose money every month of the savings that we're not able to implement it. I would encourage you to be as conservative as you possibly can on this budget until we can see some light at the end of the tunnel, which would be toward the mid-year of the upcoming fiscal year. At that point, if we seem to be moving toward a surplus in the area of operating revenues, then I think you could revisit some of the smaller programs you may want to see reinstituted. But $114,000 or $15,000 in savings is almost no savings. You almost have a zero balanced budget at this point.
Mr. Manukian?
The 80 frozen positions, do we know how many of them are management positions? Do we have any idea? If we don't, it's fine. I just, off the top of your head, no?
No, we could get that for you, but
all right.
we'd have to get a list.
Just to address some of the concerns that the speaker brought up regarding additional
Well, again, as
management.
we've done in this budget, you've had a presentation by every department of what is true management. Now, keep in mind, what has historically been classified as management is professional, technical management, and true management. And I know there's been interest in grasping onto the biggest number, but you've seen the relationships in each of the departments. And my view is we are not management heavy. And in fact, management positions have been as affected throughout the last 3 years as rank and file have been affected. My department's an example, the consolidation of now 3 departments into 2 and elimination of executive positions. So I think all of our activities and our approaches have been very defensible and very reasonable. Okay. Since this is likely the last general fund discussion, I'd like to first thank the council members for what is now 53 hours of these public meetings. I don't know when we last did 53 hours of study sessions. I know that's a tremendous time commitment on your part, not to mention the time you've spent reading the materials that we have sent you. It's been tremendous, and it's been a difficult year, and I suspect we're going to have more difficult years ahead of us. I do want to thank each and every department. They have spent hours and hours, and I will tell you I continue to be impressed with the way in which every department comes together and not only looks out for their interest, but looks out for every other department's interest, a reflection of what I believe is their concern for the community. As I've mentioned before, we have departments that frankly don't know how to reduce services. We've reduced resources, funding, and yet these departments continue to look for ways to try and provide the needed services and maintain service levels. And even though there will be impacts on there out in the community, I know that the departments at every level will continue to do what they've always done, which is to find ways to do the best they can to provide the services to the community, to meet the needs of the people in a very quality way. And frankly, I'm very proud to be serving with them. To the what I call the kitchen cabinet budget team, Bob Elliott, Jason Bradford, Michelle Nguyen, Adreen Asayan, Armin Harkalian, John Toktalian, and Lily Fang. These folks have put in hundreds and hundreds of hours preparing information for you, working on putting the budget together, and their work isn't done by any margin. They and the departments will continue to work hard to do their best to keep this budget balanced, but frankly to continue to look for ways that we can economize, reduce costs, and structurally put us in a position so at some point when the economy does recover, you'll have some capacity, I believe, to begin to restore some of the services that have been cut. But I want to thank you for your time. You still have a budget hearing ahead of you on budget. You eventually have to adopt it, but I want to thank you for the time that you've spent.
Mr. Manukian?
I wasn't done actually, but thank you for that. I also want to actually, the spreadsheets that we received yesterday, I want to commend you for doing that. I think it's very, it's a different way of presenting it, and I appreciate it. It's very telling about the status of our budget, and if I can recommend the monthly finances, it would be something of that in that format. It would be very very helpful. I also mentioned I wanted the number of revenues generated by the police department, and I see in the third spreadsheet that you have prepared, is that the total that is generated by, that should be offset against the police overtime? Just so I have a number in mind when I'm considering it. There is, if you look at the remaining program spreadsheet, and you have the police department, you have $463,000 approximately in essentials, and discretionary, which is the alarm, another $365,000. Is that the overtime that was generated?
I believe that's the alarm revenue.
I know we discussed the overtime and getting the information regarding the revenue that is generated from the overtime because your officers go and work.
Mike.
And, Madam Mayor and Council Member Manukian, I believe your request was to look at our total overtime and ask what amount of that had been reimbursed to us through various sources. And that information was emailed out a few days ago.
Okay.
But our total overtime budget expenditure is $3.2 million.
Okay.
What we receive back in direct reimbursement is about $1.1 million.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And you will have that.
And there was a brief table with 4 or 5 different categories and the breakout of that.
Then I missed it. My apologies, but thank you for that number. That's what I was looking for.
And we will double check and make sure we send it out.
All right. And again, thank you. I will make some overall comments in the final hearing regarding the budget process and all of that, but I want to thank you for these spreadsheets. They're very informative, so thank you very much.
Yeah, I would have to pass the thanks on to Mr. Bradford. He's the brains behind the outfit. So.
Now, he was the guy that was up to midnight sending spreadsheets.
Yes, but he's young and he doesn't have a life, so.
That's a good point.
We provide him with a cot in the corner of his office and all the water he can consume. So.
Okay, Mr. Najarian?
Well, I appreciate your remarks to your troops, Mr. Starber, but I also would like to commend the work by Mr. Weaver, Mr. Manukian, especially you, Madam Mayor, for sitting through these. These have been very difficult decisions for the council to make. We have been provided with reams and reams of paper, some of us electronically, some actual pulp, but we are not experts in any of these one departments, or in, except for Mr. Manukian, in the profession of accounting. And we have put in hours and hours of work, and our nerves have been frayed. Relationships have been perhaps stretched to the breaking point. We have stuck it out, though. We have been under scrutiny both in the press, in the community, by members of the Gadfly Corps that come before us. Our decisions and our discussions have been second-guessed, but I'm sure that each and every one of us have done our very best to evaluate these programs, to do the very best for the City of Glendale. We've taken time off from our families, from our jobs, from our other commissions and avocations, and I would like to thank my crew for doing the very best and sticking through this. It's not over yet, but we've gotten to a certain milestone. I'm very proud to have sat up here with the three of you, as well as Mr. Quintero, who could not be here today. It's not an easy job. This is perhaps the most grueling budget process that I've sat through, and I've been here for 6 years. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for coming in, and I apologize if I've stepped on any toes or made any offhand comments to both my colleagues or to staff or to members of the public, but it's a process that we have to go through, and I would not have wished to have gone through with it with any other group than we have sitting up here right now.
Thank you. I'll just, Mr. Weaver?
I might as well say something, too, since everybody else is. I've been sitting, well, this is my 15th year, and yes, it was the most difficult one to go through, because these kind of cuts never happened in past years. Last 3 here have been suffering. We're used to sitting here with each budget growing a little, more services given, whatever, and to do the opposite way is much tougher. It's much easier to give than to take. But I'm here virtually every day, as Mr. Starbird and staff knows. I know starting late last year, executive staff were meeting all the time. And not one day a week, 2 or 3 times a week. See the doors closed, say what's in the conference room, what's going on? Well, another budget study session. That has gone on endlessly until now. And like Jason, knowing he's working till midnight, the staff did a tremendous amount of work to present this to us. It wasn't done flippantly. I never saw any staff in my 15 years do what the staff did this year in the toughest of times. So I'm very proud of the city staff for what they've done, regardless of what anybody in the world wants to say about you. I just hope this is the last year we have to do anything like this. We can start to crawl out of this recession, the worst one since the Great Depression. So my last question is, can I cancel all the other budget study sessions off my calendar?
No, we have another budget study session on Monday.
I want you to explain that to me.
You still have GWP to wrap up, and then we have the transit fund to discuss. We cannot leave this budget without giving Steve his time for the transit fund. So and that'll be a few hours.
I just want to make sure.
You know, we've left him till last before, and as a result, not taking it up. We really we need to commit the time to it this year. So.
Well, I just want that out because we're sitting here praising everybody, yet we're coming back.
You're coming back. You're not done yet.
Well, I just want to take a minute to echo what my colleagues have said. I very much appreciate the work that staff's done and their commitment to serving the community, which I think is very obvious in these presentations. And certainly to thank my colleagues for the amount of time they put in, for the excellent questions that have been asked, for the lively discussions, for the willingness to discuss pretty much any topic. This is an ongoing process. It's not over yet. But the few comments I want to make, and I'll probably make them again, which is that I think that a lot of people, or maybe everybody, feels that we wouldn't have to do any of this if we would just find all the waste and get rid of all of the waste in the city. And I do hope that people watch this and come to realize that, yes, you can always be more efficient, always. But I think there's been a huge effort amongst the city staff and certainly amongst council to really make sure that we're as efficient and as lean as we can be to provide the services that the community expects. And I really do think that these 54, and there'll be probably 60 hours when we're done of budget study sessions, shows the effort to do that. And the real sacrifices that are being made with managers laying off their staff and cutting back on their departments, with the concessions that we're negotiating now with our employee groups, and we're certainly still in the middle of that. And the community, too, needs to realize that the point of this whole exercise is so that we can continue to maintain the quality of life that people in Glendale have come to expect. And that's really our one and only goal here. And that's what every single discussion has been about and will continue to be about. And you can see how reluctant it is for my colleagues and for myself to cut any program. But at the end of the day, we do have to make those sorts of calls, and that's the difficult part. And what's tough is that one person's pork is another person's pet project. You cannot cancel one program in the city without somebody being upset about it. So it may sound easy from the outside, and I get emails like this all the time. Well, why would you even think of cutting this when you've got this program? What that person doesn't realize is that I have an email that has the exact opposite mirror view. Why would you cut this when you have that? So it's going to be a difficult time. It's a difficult time for everybody, and it's no more difficult for cities. And I do hope that the public has a chance to watch at least some of these meetings, and I hope that they at least give them the confidence that we've been looking through this budget really with a fine-tooth comb like I don't think has ever been done in this city, going through department by department, program by program, employee by employee. We will continue to do that. I think it should be a model of how budgets are always done, whether we're in lean times or we're in fat times. We should always be efficient. We should always do the best we can to spend the taxpayers' money in the wisest way possible. So I look forward to the final meetings. I look forward to concluding this. And I hope that we do have a recovery in the next few years, and that whatever programs are suspended, and I do call it suspension and not cancellation, that they can eventually come back.
I could add one thing, because I can't let this go without saying, my 15 years, we have gone through this level of detail in different ways. And the difference this time is Mr. Manukian asked for a lot of information. I thought, oh my God, how many weeks is it going to take staff to provide it to Mr. Manukian? This is different this time. Council. And you asked for it. I've got weeks going to get it. Oh, we have that. We'll get it to you. The level of detail you went in, the backup, all readily available. I never saw that before. This was surprising. I kept guessing, you have that? You can furnish that? An hour later, we might have it? Amazing. Really did it the right way this time. Don't throw away the book.
Okay, any other final comments?
City Attorney.
Howard.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, it's important, I think, for this council to note that we have the official budget hearing coming up June 21st of 2011, consistent with the charter, and again, unless there's an objection from the council, it will be so ordered.
No objection.
That will be the date for the budget hearing. And we'll get the appropriate published notice out.
6 p.m.
Thank you. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.